How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan, this is All You Can Board, and today we're talking board game mechanics, specifically drafting. So this is a brand new series. Every episode I'm going to feature a new board game mechanic, and I'm going to break it down, give you an explanation of what that mechanic is in case you haven't heard about it before, or maybe you didn't even realize that you were interacting with it and you just didn't know that that's what it was called. And then I'm gonna go over 5 to 6 games across some categories that'll be games that you can dive into this mechanic a little bit more, or you can explore for the very first time if you're just learning about it here. So again, the mechanic we're talking about today is drafting. Now I have to edit that in, like I've committed drafting. Now there are 2 main styles of drafting, and that's open drafting and closed drafting. So when you hear that a board game has drafting mechanics in it, in general, it'll probably fall into one of those 2 camps, but as always with most board game mechanics, there's different nuances, applications, and quirks that these mechanics will use as people get more creative with their games, but in general, you can probably expect it'll fall into one of those 2 categories. So let's start with open drafting. Now, open drafting is something that even if you haven't heard the term before or it seems kind of foreign to you, if you've played a decent amount of board games, there is a good chance you've been engaging in the open drafting mechanic and just didn't realize. So open drafting is when that there is a public selection of items, whether those be cards, resources, tiles, any number of different possibilities, and they are available to everyone. And you selecting one of those items blocks it from your opponent being able to select it. Say there are 4 different items available and I take the leftmost one, that is now not available for the rest of the people at the table. I've drafted that item to myself and usually it will be replaced by something else, and now my opponents have to choose from the items that are remaining. A great example of this that is sort of like a modern day game that a lot of people have played, in some ways a gateway game, just a really popular one, is of course Azul. So Azul, you may not have realized if you were playing it, actually utilizes open drafting. In Azul, there are a number of factories that all form a common pool of tiles to choose from. The process of selecting a tile or tiles on your turn is drafting. You are drafting these tiles. These are available to everyone in the game, and while you're deciding what to take, you're also considering what you're leaving for your opponents, what will be taken before your next turn, and how all of that influences your ultimate strategy that round or that game. Azul is a great example of open drafting because a lot of people have played it and probably didn't always realize, unless you're into the board game hobby or more of an enthusiast, that is actually open drafting in progress. But that is essentially what it boils down to. There is a public selection of tiles, of cards, of resources, and you need to select one that is essentially removing that as an option for the other players at the table. So closed drafting is very similar. Sometimes it's called pick and pass or select and pass, something in that vein. You probably can guess at this point what the difference is between open drafting and closed drafting, and that's the fact that in closed drafting, the items you're selecting are usually secret information. So that the best example application, this is if you had a hand of cards and you were going to select one of those cards for yourself, for your hand, for your deck, whatever the case may be, and then you're passing the remainder to the person on your left. They're going to make the same selection. You don't know what everyone is picking, but as you get things past you, you're realizing what is missing, especially if you've seen the same hand come around a couple times. You're then able to guess and discern what other people are selecting around the table and factor that into your strategy and what you're deciding. But essentially, all these selections are being made in a closed ecosystem, where in open drafting, you can see what people are drafting around the table because it's happening right in front of you on the board or in front of you on the table in some capacity. Very often, closed drafting will actually be an element that begins a game and will serve as a way to give you a unique strategy to focus on or unique abilities to utilize for that game. An example of closed drafting would be the card selection that opens games of Agricola. You'll be given a series of occupation and improvement cards and begin selecting them and passing the unselected ones to other players at the table. And this will shape how you play that session of Agricola, because you'll have a unique selection of abilities and strategies that you may not have access to the next time you play. An example of a closed draft that happens during the game itself and isn't just an opening aspect of the game would be Seven Wonders. In Seven Wonders, the main crux of what you'll be doing is selecting a card from the hand you're given and then passing the remaining cards, at which point you'll receive a new hand from the player on your left or right and continue until all the cards are selected. And that is essentially drafting. Now again, board game designers are really creative and they're going to find really interesting ways to kind of put spins on the drafting mechanic. It might not always be recognizable, but in essence, if you're making a selection from a public display that is blocking your opponents from making some of those same selections, or if you're doing that in a closed ecosystem like a hand and then passing it around, generally that is drafting. You might just find that there's some interesting twists in how that's applied in different board games. All that out of the way, explanation is done. Let's get into the fun part and the real reason you're probably here, and let's talk about the games. All right, I got five games for you across 5 different categories. All of them use drafting in some way, some open, some closed drafting, but all of them are going to utilize that mechanic. And the first category is going to be an easy one. That is for your first draft. So if you are new to drafting, maybe this video is your first introduction to it, or maybe you've done drafting before, but you're looking for some way to dive into it more intentionally, I've got a game for you for your first draft. And that's a game called Sushi Go Party. So Sushi Go Party is essentially one of the easiest and purest drafting games. It even says on the box, the deluxe pick and pass card game, which I told you, sometimes closed drafting can be called pick and pass or choose and pass, things like that. Essentially what Sushi Go Party is, and there is a version, I should say, I'll lead with this, there is a smaller version that doesn't have the party aspect, and it's just a much simpler version. I like Party because it comes with a bunch of ways to sort of expand the game if you're enjoying it and try different types of sushi and essentially make the game last you longer in your collection before you feel like you want to move on to another one. Sushi Go Party, essentially everyone is going to be dealt a hand of different sushi, and you're going to look at that hand, you're going to select one of them, put it down in front of you into a sort of like little tableau type of thing you're building, or just a selection of your picks, and then you're going to pass the rest of the cards, and you're going to get past a new hand, and that is the entire game. There's going to be 3 rounds of this until all the hands have been depleted, and you're going to add up all the points you've collected. Some of the type of cards you're going to be dealing with are things like dumplings. Dumplings will score you more points for the more dumplings you have. So utilizing some strategy in the closed drafting environment, you might be, if I can speak properly, might be past a hand of cards that say it has 4 dumplings in it. That signals to you that there are a bunch of dumplings available. And yes, other people might select those dumplings before that hand makes it back to you, depending on the player count of the game you're playing, but they also might not. And you selecting one of those dumplings reduces the amount of the hand, and maybe it becomes less attractive looking to other people, and they don't know that you selected one of those dumplings. So you might select one and hope it comes back to you, hope that more dumplings get past you in other subsequent hands, and try to earn more points. I think it works out to something like if you have 1 dumpling, it's 1 point, 2 is 3, 3 is 5, things like that. I think if you have 5 or 6 dumplings, it's worth like 15 points. So that's an example that you might be trying to go for. Another one of the simple cards is Maki rolls. So Maki rolls can have 1, 2, or 3 symbols on them, I believe. Maybe they can have more. Actually, it's been a while since I threw down like a real big game of Sushi Go that had Maki rolls because there's so many options in here. But essentially, there's going to be a certain number of icons on them. And so you might get past a card that has the maximum number of icons. That's a really attractive version of that card because at the end of that round, whoever has the most icons, not cards, but the icons on them is going to get, I think it's 6 points. There's a bunch of cards like that in Sushi Go. They are very simple. Like this is a very easy to get into closed drafting game. And again, the best part of the party variant, the best part of the party is the fact that after you play with some of these sushi, say you're like, yeah, this is really good, but the dumplings are just so simple. I'm not really digging that. You can take dumplings out of the game and try a different sushi in its place. There's a bunch of different ways you can modify. You can find a layout and a setup that you find most interesting. You can amend it to be easier depending on the group that's coming into it. This is a great introductory drafting game. It is, again, closed drafting, just so there's a distinction there, but one that it's easy to go back to, and one that I honestly constantly suggest to groups that might have, people that are a little bit more apprehensive about some strategy games or deeper board games. It is a really good introduction to that mechanic. Okay, so the next category is for when you want the draft to set the tone. And what do I mean by that? That is essentially kind of like the example I gave with Agricola at the start. This is a game where the closed draft that begins the game, sort of even before it even starts, is going to set the tone for your strategy and what you're going to actually be doing in this game, how you might be trying to accomplish your goals. And my example for this is going to be Res Arcana. So Res Arcana is a really, really great game. I've talked about it a few times on the channel, so has Carlo. It's showed up in our top 50s. And the game itself boils down to you having a small deck of cards that all of these cards are going to have different abilities, and you're utilizing them all in conjunction with each other, trying to find a path to be the first person to reach a point threshold. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff in the game. There's actually open drafting in the game too, because there are going to be places of power and some other cards that are available to everyone in the game. And if you're the first one to go there, you'll get access to it. So there's some open drafting as well, but we're talking specifically about the closed draft that starts the game, that sets the tone. And so in Res Arcana, the draft is a variant. You don't have to use it, but I'd really recommend doing it, especially after you get familiar with the game. I just think the drafts that start games are such an interesting and important mechanic because it makes every game have some more variability. You can sort of get, the better you are at understanding the rules of the game and the strategy kind of comes out in the draft and in the choices you make before the game even starts. So you can feel yourself getting better at the game the more you draft and the more you feel like that draft was effective. Essentially, let's use a two-player game as an example. You and your opponent are going to have a certain number of cards that are selected face down in this game, and you guys are each going to start with, I think it's 4. I think each person has 4 cards in their hand. You're going to pick one of those, and you're going to swap hands. And so you don't know at the start what your opponent picked because you didn't see their hand of cards, but you are seeing what was passed to you. And now you know what they didn't select, which is information that will be valuable. You're also going to pick something and then pass the remaining 2 cards back. So you keep not only making card selections, you're getting and giving information based on what you're picking, but also what you aren't picking from those cards. I think you're going to do that twice. You do a 4-card hand and then you do another 4-card hand, and that's going to essentially make your deck. And then you play with those cards and you try to use the strategy that you've crafted to reach that point threshold first. It's a really easier, it's the rule set's more complex obviously than Sushi Go, but it's not a really imposing draft environment. Like I said, it also has open drafting in it, so you can kind of really learn both sides of the drafting mechanic a little bit. But the closed draft is just, to me, that is what made Res Arcana sort of rise in the ranks for me, is utilizing that closed draft and letting that shape my strategy. It's a really, really fun process. So if you're looking for something that sort of sets the tone as a draft, but you don't want to go into something quite as heavy as Agricola, like I used it as an example at the start, Res Arcana would be a really, really great option. All right, moving on. Let's talk about for when open drafting is more your thing. Now, I know this is kind of a vague category, but open drafting is sort of, I would say, the easier one to go into. And it's, like I mentioned, it's one that you likely have already used in some capacity and you just didn't realize it, or you did. And maybe you're looking for another way to dive into open drafting a little bit more, or one where that's more the crux of the game. And I've got a good example for you, and that is going to be Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth. So if you're unaware, this is essentially a re-implementation of Seven Wonders Duel. We talked about Seven Wonders at the start. There's a 2-player variant called Seven Wonders Duel. This is essentially that. It has a Lord of the Rings theme, obviously, instead, but it is more than just a theme. There are some new additions and new tweaks to the rules that, honestly, it makes it a better game. This is, if you, I have both versions, Seven Wonders Duel and now the Lord of the Rings version. I'm going to be parting with Seven Wonders Duel, something that I thought I never would do. Or I might keep it for sentimental reasons. I haven't quite decided yet, because I do have the expansions as well. But this is just a way better version of the game. I enjoy playing this one more, and even if I wasn't into the Lord of the Rings theme, I just think it's a more solid version. All that aside, the entire crux of what you're doing, how many, crux is one of those words that I'm just realizing I use a lot. I did this before. This is an aside. We're doing a little all-you-can-board aside right now, where there's certain words that I find that I all of a sudden gravitate to more often, and then we'll use multiple times in the same video. I need a crux counter to see how many times I've used the word crux already in this video. You're going to have a pyramid of cards, and this is going to look a little bit different, the pyramid shape, in all of the 3 ages that are in the game, but essentially you can only pick the cards that aren't covered by another card. So the ones that are face up and don't have anything overlapping with them. Those are now all available for open drafting, which means that I can select any of them, but so can my opponent. And me selecting one is going to block that from my opponent. Or it might, even in this game specifically, it might reveal a new card that wasn't previously available. So the reason I selected this one is because you're not just thinking of decisions based on what am I picking and how is that going to affect what my opponent can pick. You're also looking at it as, what am I going to make available for my opponent, and is what I want more important than what I might be giving them? That's when drafting starts to get a little bit more complex and nuanced, and that's when I really start to appreciate drafting as a mechanic, is when you're having to weigh all these different layers of decision out of one decision. I want this card, but I can't just say, well, it makes sense because I want this and it's good for my strategy. It also is, Do I need to take that now? Is my opponent even interested in that card right now? Because if they're not, maybe I delay taking that. Maybe I think it's safe for me to leave that and I'll take something that I know they want or that is more contested between us, and I'll come back to the one that they're not interested in. Obviously, you're still leaving that up to the possibility that your opponent says, I'm just going to take that to stop them from taking it. But this is the genius of drafting. This is what I love about it. So if you're looking for an open drafting game that sort of really starts to explain what the open drafting is capable of and what makes it so special, you don't have to do the Lord of the Rings version. You can obviously do Seven Wonders Duel. It's a fantastic game. It's been in my top 10 board games of all time, I think, since we started doing this channel. So obviously I'd still advocate for that one, but if you have the choice and you aren't someone who's opposed to the Lord of the Rings theme, go with this one. You'll have a better experience, and I just think it's a great, great open drafting example. Okay, moving. Ooh, all the components just fell. Oh, they're still going. That's just disgusting to hear. Okay, let's go into the next one. So this is for when select and pass, or pick and pass. Let's use pick and pass. It's the more alliteration. It rolls off the tongue. For when pick and pass isn't enough. And so I talked at the beginning a little bit about the nuances that, that designers will get creative in the ways that they utilize their mechanics. And so I wanted to pick a game that I love that puts a little bit of a spin on it. It still uses the essence of pick and pass, but it sort of ups it in different ways so you can see how things can get creative sometimes. And that example is one you've heard me talk about before, and that is Biblios, one of the games that looks so boring on the front that it's hard for me to sell it to people, and yet it's one of my favorite games in my collection. So, and look, it looks like a little book. It looks like a little book, and it even opens a little, it's just great. Biblios is essentially a drafting game, but it has this twist on it. So what you're going to be doing, I'm going to use a 3-player game as an example here, is you are going to, on your turn, be divvying up cards to different possible spots. And those possible spots are, you're going to pick a card and you can keep it for yourself, but you can only keep one card on your turn for yourself out of all the cards that you're going to look at. So you're going to look at one card and you can keep it for yourself. You can put it into an open display that is going to be available and divvied out during this round to your opponents. You're essentially giving cards to your opponents. Or you can take that card and put it face down into a deck. Only you will know that card that you put into that deck, and that deck will be available in the second phase of the game. Now, all the cards that you're looking at in Biblios are coming across, I think it's 5 different, well, I know it's 5 different colors. I'm not going to name them all because I'm going to get them all wrong, but I think it's actually I'm going to try. I think it's blue, brown, green, orange. They're not on the back. Whatever. There's 5 colors. I shouldn't have even tried. I knew it from the start, and I still took a stab at it. You're going to be getting cards across all those colors that come in values of, I think it's 1 to 4. And you want higher numbers, obviously, because at the end of the game, at the end of phase 2, when the whole game's done, whoever has the most of a color across the values, like if I had a single 4 of blue in my hand versus someone else who had a 2 and a 1, they have more cards, but I have a higher value, you're going to win the points that are showing on the middle of the board face up. And those points are illustrated by dice. Those dice will all start on the number 3, which means that every color is worth 3 points, but those dice are going to be manipulated by other cards you can draft that move those die values lower to make a certain color worth less, or higher to make a certain color worth more. And so the drafting, yes, you're doing pick and pass, but you're no longer just passing to your opponents. You're now having to weigh, do I want this card for myself, or am I okay with giving it to my opponents? Or do I want to put this into a face down deck that we all won't have access to until the second phase, at which point we're going to be flipping those cards and then using the gold in our hands to bid on them, which is obviously, that's a separate mechanic. We'll talk about bidding one day. But the drafting is now more interesting. You're not just saying, do I want this or do I want this opponent to have it? Even the aspect of giving the cards to your opponent, you're not picking which opponent gets which cards. You're putting them into a face-up display, and that's going to then go clockwise, and your opponents are going to pick from the cards there. So if you're playing a 4-player game, you're going to have 3 cards face up, and then those 3 players are going to be able to choose from them. The interesting twist here is that, say the first card you look at is a 4 of blue, which is a really, really high value blue card, and maybe blue's worth a lot of points, so it makes sense for you to take it. Yes, that does make sense for you to take it, but you have to then realize that the next 3 cards that you're going to flip over right now, you can't take. You're only allowed to take 1. So if you think there's another card you'd want more, or another really valuable card, you have no choice but to then give those to your opponents or put it face down on the deck. So you're weighing some decisions and the probability of what cards are going to come up next and how much you truly want a card. If a 2 gold comes up, which is the gold is again used in the second phase to be able to bid on some of the cards that are in that face down deck. 2 gold is not a bad card. Do you think a 3 gold is going to come up? And are you willing to take 2 gold and have to give 3 gold to one of your opponents? Or are you going to say, I'm going to bank on the fact that there's a better card than 2 gold. I'm going to give that to my opponents. And then every other card is like 1 orange, 1 green, 1 brown, and you don't want any of them. Well, it's too late. You know, you have to take one of them. You have to take one. You have to give ones to your opponent, and you have to put one face down. So again, it's a little twist on the pick and pass format. I would say that there's nothing that's overly complex about this one that you can't dive into it if you like this as your first drafting game. This could be your first experience with that drafting mechanic, but especially if you've already used drafting and you're like, I really like it, but I want to see some people evolve on it. I want to see some twists on it. Biblios is a great one, and you might just get addicted to it because Biblios is a game that easily plays in like 30 minutes or less every time once you get into it, and I come back to it constantly and have a blast every time. So that is Biblios, and that is for when you want a little bit of a twist on that drafting mechanic. So this is for the heavy gamers who want some drafting, and that is going to be Civolution. So this is a pretty heavy game. This is you can tell by the size of the box, and you can't tell the weight, but it is a heavy game, both metaphorically and literally. Now, while Civolution doesn't actually have a draft at the start, it does have a card selection process. And the reason I'm talking about that aspect here, even though this is specifically a drafting video and doesn't actually have a draft, is that the better you are at drafting, the better you will be at this initial stage of the game. It's almost like you'd be taking everything you learned about drafting from the other games on this list or other games you've been playing and using that to sort of inform the decisions you'd make in the initial selection process of Civolution. And the way that that really impacts the game is you're going to have all these different technology decks, and all of them have different ways that they can influence how you're going to do the strategy in the game. And this is a civilization building game. You're going to have all these different paths you can go. You can be trying to get a whole bunch of dudes onto, or dudettes, onto the map to be able to, have more terrain, to be able to expand it, explore more, to get more points that way. You can ignore that completely and you can go in an entirely different direction with Civolution. It's impossible for me to explain all the rules here. I will have much more to say about Civolution on the channel, so don't worry, you will hear me talk about it more. But in addition, Civolution does have a bunch of open drafting possibilities. There are a myriad of tiles that you will be drafting that your opponents also have access to, and the cards that you initially chose at the beginning of the game will be available in an open drafting format for you to collect during the game to continue to further your strategy. You're thinking, what works in conjunction with the other ones I've been given options to draft from? What is the strategy that I'm hoping to go into this game? What do I think my opponent is going into it? How are we going to, get in each other's way or not get in each other's way? It becomes this aspect where, again, I think this is a good example of a game that if you get really into Civolution and if you're playing it often enough, you'll be able to manage the balance between what you want to do and which cards, tiles, and items you need to select to be able to further that agenda versus what you can notice your opponent is doing and making selections that will sometimes get in their way but not completely derail the strategy you're undertaking as well. I just love this game so much, and I'm trying in my head to not get too much into the nuances of it, because to talk about Civolution even minorly would probably take me half as long as this entire video was. But like I said, you will be hearing me talk about Civolution a lot more. But if you're a heavier gamer, if you're into these type of heavy games and you really like the draft and you're looking for something new to sort of tie those two together, you really can't go wrong with Civolution. And it's just such a amazing game to dive into. Can't recommend it enough. Those are 5 drafting games that if you are getting into the mechanic for the first time because you've been watching this video, or you've always loved the drafting mechanic and this is just reinvigorating some options for you, I think you'd be in good company if you tried any of these out, and you'll probably have a lot of people in your game groups that will really enjoy these games as well. So that is the very first video, the very first installment of the Board Game Mechanics series. The next episode, because I'm always going to preview what the next mechanic is, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite mechanics, and that is worker placement games. You'll see that video coming up in January. Very similar format. I'll explain what a worker placement game is, and we'll talk about 5 to 6 games across 5 to 6 categories that I think are great examples of worker placement games and that you might want to dive into. thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like this series idea. Obviously, this is one that can go on for a long time. I'm gonna be doing them once a month, trying to cover every board game mechanic. And the goal here is not just to create entertaining content with it. I want this to be a channel in the space that is also a good option for people who are looking to get into the hobby. And there's a lot of terms we throw around with like things like worker placement, tableau building, analysis paralysis, all this stuff that we are all used to and is just commonplace. But for people who might just be, searching board games on YouTube and then starting to watch a video and enjoying it, they might hear a term and say, well, I'm enjoying this video, but I don't actually know what that means. And they're going to Google and stuff. I'm trying to make this a bit more of a one-stop destination in that sense, where you can learn about board games, you can get into the hobby, and then you can dive into the hobby as much as we are and get more engrossed in it if you want to. So let me know if you like the series and leave any questions, any comments. Let me know your favorite drafting games, because honestly, that is one mechanic that I am looking for more games to try out and to get into my collection, especially closed drafting. I'm a huge fan of the limited environment in Magic the Gathering, even though I hate where Magic the Gathering is going these days and it's preventing me from playing it as much. That closed drafting ecosystem is one of my favorites. So if you have other game recommendations that have that kind of strong closed drafting, or open drafting, let me know, because I'll check them out, and then there'll be ones that maybe I'll recommend at other points in the channel. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.